and make sure that people most in need receive the benefits. I would thank the Chair and would yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to thank the Senator from Alabama for calling this body's attention once again to the debt crisis that we face as a country. I was with some people just a little while ago, and I was telling them a story about a conversation I had had in Colorado about our debt and our deficit and the moral obligation we have to our kids to actually deal with this problem, face up to the facts. And my then 10-year-old daughter was with me, Caroline, and we walked out on the front stoop of this place, and she said to me, "Daddy," and I said, "What?" And she said, "Just to be clear," she was making fun of me because I say that sometimes, said, "Just to be clear, I'm not paying that back," which is the right attitude for her to have. It's the attitude that children all across this country ought to have, and it's the attitude we ought to have. And I want the Senator to know that I look forward, as we get into this discussion this summer, to figuring out how we find a bipartisan, comprehensive path through this morass so that Caroline Bennett doesn't have to pay back a debt that she didn't accrue. I wanted to come, Mr. President, today to talk about the economy because I think one thing we can agree on in this body for sure is that the best deficit reduction program we could find would be to get this economy moving again. I wanted to talk about one sector in particular that's created tremendous economic growth in Colorado, and that's the wind energy sector. I know my colleague from Colorado, Mark Udall, came down earlier today to discuss the same issue, and I so much appreciate his continued efforts in fighting for these jobs. Just a piece of context here, Mr. President. We face very significant structural issues in this economy that we have. And I brought this slide down here before, but what it shows is that our gross domestic product, our economic output, is actually higher today than it was when we went into the worst recession since the Great Depression. Our productivity is off the charts. That's the blue line, the second line. And it's been going that way since the early 90s because of our response to competition from China and India and other places, because of our use of technology, and because of the recession itself, which drove productivity straight up as firms all across the United States tried to figure out how to get through this tough time with fewer people. But median household income continues to fall in this country, and we've got 23 or 24 million people who are unemployed or underemployed, even though we're generating this economic output. And I think there are two fundamental answers to this. One is education. The worst the unemployment rate ever got for people with a college degree in the worst recession since the Great Depression was 4.5%. But the other is innovation. Jobs are going to be created tomorrow and next week and the week after that that have rising wages, not lowering ones, not falling ones. And this economic recovery, like the last economic recovery, those two together, are the first recoveries we have had as a nation in our history where economic growth decoupled from job growth and wage growth. And I don't know about you, Mr. President, but that is what I hear about most in my town hall meetings at home. The wind production tax credit, it seems to me, cuts right to the core of whether and how we want to compete in this global and changing economy. I'll show you another picture here, Mr. President. This is it. This is a factory in Colorado, in Brighton, Colorado, bricks and mortar, made in America. It's a wind production facility. I want to tell you about some fly-by-night experimental industry here. This credit has triggered tremendous economic growth in Colorado and all across the country. Good-paying jobs, manufacturing jobs here in the United States. As Representative Steve King, a Republican from Iowa, has said recently in an op-ed that he published, the production tax credit has driven as much as $20 billion in private investment. This is not some Bolshevik scheme. That's $20 billion in private investment supporting jobs here in the United States, manufacturing jobs here in the United States. Wind power accounts for more than a third of all new U.S. electric generation in recent years. In Colorado alone, Mr. President, it's created 6,000 jobs. It's moved our state toward a more diversified and cleaner energy portfolio. But because they can't get any certainty out of Washington, like everybody else, developers and manufacturers are already starting layoffs. They're laying off employees today in anticipation of the credit expiring at the end of the year. Vestas, which has a huge manufacturing footprint in Colorado, from Windsor all the way south to Pueblo, is poised to lay off 1,600 workers if we fail to act. It's hard for me to understand when our concerns about the deficit and our concerns about economic growth are ones that we hear about every day on the floor, why laying off 1,600 workers in Colorado is a good idea. Iberdrola Renewables, also doing business in Colorado, has already laid off 50 employees. Nationally, 37,000 jobs are at risk, not to mention the ones that we could have created after 2012, but won't if we let this credit expire. You know, I know, Mr. President, that sometimes I sound like a broken record, but the world is not going to wait for us. Our largest single export today is energy, actually, interestingly enough. And that's a very recent occurrence, that we became a net exporter of energy. Before that, our single largest export was aircraft. We build the best aircraft in the world. $30 billion a year is what that export is to the United States. China's export of solar panels last year was $15 billion. Half our largest single export. They didn't export one solar panel 10 years ago, and we invented the technology in the United States. In fact, some of us claim that we invented it right at home in Colorado. And I'm sure that China would love to have this business as well. Or we can get out of our own way and extend the PTC, extend the tax credit, save those jobs, and grow our own clean energy economy. Mr. President, this is not a partisan issue. I led a letter several months ago where Republicans and Democrats from the Colorado delegation came together to urge a quick extension as part of the payroll deal. That effort, unfortunately, was not successful, nor have the others that we've tried to take in the interim. Shortly after our letter, I filed an amendment, a bipartisan amendment, the senator from Kansas, fully paid for, one-year extension of the credit. You know, this place has become the land of flickering lights. We extend one thing for a month. We extend another thing for 2 months. Very proud of the work we're doing on the FDA right now, which is a 5-year reauthorization. But my goodness, couldn't we just extend this for a year to give people some degree of certainty, particularly when it's paid for? And I'd like to thank Senator Moran, Republican from Kansas, for joining me, or letting me join him to lead that amendment. Following that, several colleagues and I partnered with Senator Grassley and others to write a bill that will extend the credit for 2 years. There's clearly plenty of bipartisan support out there. And I know people in my state, whether Republicans or Democrats or independents are not even thinking about that, know that they want us to get this done. Nearly 7,500 Coloradans have already signed a petition on my website supporting the wind production tax credit. So I'd urge others today who are watching this to visit my website and please add their name. Mr. President, I conclude by asking why, when the economic stakes are as high as they are, Congress cannot get their act together on this. We need to extend the wind production tax credit, and we need to do it now. Mr. President, I'd ask that my next statement appear separately in the record from the one that I just gave.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to speak on Coburn Amendment number 2353, and I want to be the first to say how much I appreciate my colleague from Oklahoma's efforts at deficit reduction. In fact, we're currently working together to promote a comprehensive approach to deficit reduction, and I deeply appreciate his leadership, which in many ways has been unparalleled on this issue. However, I have to oppose this particular amendment, and I understand we're likely to consider the amendment this afternoon. I'd urge my colleagues to oppose the amendment by supporting the motion to table. This amendment will repeal the popular Environmental Quality Incentives Program, EQIP, and the Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP. Both are critical programs authorized under the conservation title of the Farm Bill. In Colorado, I have heard time and time again from our farmers and our ranchers how critical these programs are to holding on to their family farms. EQIP, for example, is on the front line of agricultural production. It helps farmers ensure that their operations contribute to clean water and clean air in our rural communities. It proactively and successfully addresses new and emerging resource issues to avert the need for regulation, to put our farmers and ranchers in a place where they have less regulation, not more, because of the work they're doing on the ground to conserve their land. Let me just give you one example from Colorado. EQIP resources have been used to ensure that the sage grouse stays off the endangered species list, a listing that would threaten ranchers all across the West. That's a result of the great work that's been done by farmers and ranchers in Colorado with the EQIP program. By providing resources to mark barbed wire fences, making them more visible to the threatened bird, EQIP is working for farmers and ranchers, and it is working well. It's the flagship of voluntary incentive-based conservation programs, which is a direction I think we should be heading in, a direction we head in this Farm Bill. Both EQIP and CSP provide quantifiable benefits that reflect the varied conservation challenges all across our country. So, Mr. President, I strongly support this new conservation title as we reported out of committee in a bipartisan vote. And as I've mentioned and as has been discussed on this bill is also remarkable for the cuts that it makes. $23.6 billion. To my knowledge, there is not any committee, any other committee in the Senate or any committee in the House of Representatives that's actually reached bipartisan agreement, and in this case, bipartisan consensus on budget cuts, which is the way we should be doing business around here, because it's what the American people and the people in Colorado expect from us, particularly on these difficult questions around our deficit and our debt. And $6.4 billion of those cuts, $6.4 billion of those $23 billion came from the conservation title, not all of which I liked. But we made difficult compromises at the committee level, and we ought not make further cuts on the floor, especially to programs that make smart and effective investments in our rural communities. So I will oppose, for those reasons, amendment number 2353 and support the motion to table, and I'd urge my colleagues from both sides of the aisle to do the same. Finally, I'd like to say thank you to the chairman of this committee, to the ranking member, Pat Roberts, and to the chair, Debbie Stabenow, for their extraordinary bipartisan work in getting the bill this far. And it is my fervent hope that leadership on both sides reaches an agreement on these amendments so that we can move forward and do the right thing for our farmers and ranchers back home in Colorado. And with that, I see my colleague from Connecticut, Senator Lieberman. And Mr. President, thank you for your patience. I yield the floor.
Mr. President. The senator from Connecticut.
I thank the chair and I thank my friend from Colorado. Mr. President, I rise to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
I thank the chair. I want to speak about the really urgent need for the Senate to adopt cybersecurity legislation. And I begin by recalling a recent story in the Washington Post that detailed how a young man living an ocean away from us was able to use his computer to hack into the cyber control system of a local water utility here in the United States. It took him just 10 minutes and required no special tools or no special training. While the hacker could have taken over the water company's operations and caused real damage, instead he posted screenshots of his hack on the internet to show that he had been there and prove his point that our nation's internet security is woefully lax. And it took very little in the way of resources or skill to penetrate it. Mr. President, this kind of story is but one piece of what I would call an avalanche of evidence showing that there is an urgent need to pass comprehensive cybersecurity legislation that will safeguard our critical cyber infrastructure. The fact is, as this 22-year-old's activities showed, and as authorities in the area, such as Admiral Mike McConnell, the former director of National Intelligence, has said that cyber structure, which is owned by private entities, is simply not adequately defended. And when it's not adequately defended, and here I'm talking about vital national systems, the electric power grid, water companies, transportation systems, pipelines, et cetera, when those are not, the cyber systems that control them now are not adequately protected, it means our nation is not adequately protected, because a cyber attack can incapacitate vital national entities that we all depend on every day, and in fact cause enormous harm and loss of life, as much as a conventional attack by air in earlier confrontations and conflicts. Yesterday, the majority leader came to the floor of the Senate and spoke, I thought, eloquently about the urgency of the Senate adopting cybersecurity legislation. I wanted to come to the floor today to thank Senator Reid for that statement and to say, as chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, how strongly I agree with him. And of course, we're not alone. A few days ago, 6 of our nation's most experienced national security leaders, spanning the last 2+ administrations, transcending any lines of partisanship, wrote a letter to Senator Reid urging him to bring up the cybersecurity legislation as soon as possible, and that's a quote, as soon as possible. In that letter to both, not just Senator Reid, but to Senator McConnell, the Republican leader as well, former Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mike Chertoff from the Bush administration, former Director of National Intelligence, Admiral Mike McConnell, I've referred to, began in the Bush administration, former Deputy Defense Secretary Paul Wolfowitz, also from the previous administration, former NSA and CIA Director Mike Hayden, also from the previous administration, Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General James Cartwright, and former Defense Secretary, Deputy Defense Secretary Bill Lynn sent this letter. Incidentally, to say what is already a matter of public record, in doing so, they express opinions that are quite similar to what we've heard from all the leaders of the current administration when it comes to security. Secretary of Defense Panetta, the Director of National Intelligence Clapper, the Director of the CIA, Petraeus, and so on, and of course Secretary Napolitano of the Department of Homeland Security. I want to read from this letter from these national security leaders because it really sums up where we are. And I quote now, "Given the time left in this legislative session and the upcoming election this fall, we are concerned that the window of opportunity to pass legislation that is, in our view, critically necessary to protect our national and economic security is quickly disappearing." And these, in the letter, they went on to say, and I quote again, "We, the signers of the letter, carry the burden of knowing, along with a lot of the rest of us, that 9/11 might have been averted with the intelligence that existed at the time. We do not want to be in the same position again when cyber 9/11 hits. It is not a question of whether this will happen, it is a question of when." End quote. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to include the text of this letter in the record of the Senate.
Without objection.
I thank the Chair. And so the Majority Leader came to the floor yesterday, as I've said, echoing these sentiments in his floor speech when he said, and I quote, "When virtually every intelligence expert says we need to secure the systems that make the lights come on, inaction is not an option," end quote. I couldn't agree more with Senator Reid. The fact is that the House of Representatives, the so-called other body of Congress, has passed a cybersecurity bill, a package that I think takes some significant initial good steps, and I thank the House for that. But I believe that the bipartisan Senate Cybersecurity Act of 2012, S-2105, which is sponsored by Senators Collins, Feinstein, Rockefeller, and me, takes the additional necessary steps and therefore to secure our cyber systems, and therefore is preferable. And it is preferable in large part because it addresses the need to secure our nation's critical cyber infrastructure. That is, the computers that control the systems that, if commandeered, attacked, or intruded upon, could allow an attacker to open and close key valves and switches in pipelines for gas and oil, in refineries, in factories, in water and sewer systems, in electric plants, in banks, and along transportation nodes without detection by their operators. Mr. President, we need to pass this bill or something very much like it so we can go to conference with the House and iron out whatever differences we have this year so we can get legislation to the President's desk, and he has endorsed, I'm grateful to say, S-2105, and certainly endorsed the principles that are in it. We have to do that so we raise our defenses before we are victims of a cyber 9/11. The time remaining to do so in this session is obviously growing shorter. We know that the lame duck session will be almost exclusively taken up with difficult questions about the budget debt, sequester, the expiration of the so-called Bush tax cuts, and much more. So we've got to act, and I'm really encouraged by Senator Reid's statement yesterday and my own belief after conversations with him that he is, the leader is intent on bringing this legislation to the floor in July. The truth is, if we don't take it up in July and see whether we've got the votes, and I'm confident we will when it comes to the floor, we're not going to be able to pass this legislation in a way that's timely and allows us to go to conference, reach an agreement, and send the bill to the President of the United States for signature. When we talk about cybersecurity, the biggest threats we all know come from other nations, nation-states, also non-state actors such as terrorists and organized crime syndicates. But this young man that I referred to at the beginning of my statement and his ability to quite easily penetrate the cyber control system of a local water company in the United States shows us that an attack can come from just about anyone and from just about anywhere. According to the Washington Post story, and I quote, this individual who goes by the name Prof, P-R-O-F, is a bright, unemployed 22-year-old who favors hoodie sweatshirts and lives in his parents' home somewhere overseas, end quote. But this particular good guy, white hat hacker, knows the risks that our nation is facing. He told the Post, and I quote again, eventually somebody will get access to a major system and people will be hurt. It's just a matter of time, end quote. That is the truth. 6 of our nation's premier equity security experts are in agreement with this 22-year-old hacker. As they said in their letter, it's just a matter of time, and we've got to act before that time comes. To my colleagues who have concerns about the Cybersecurity Act of 2011, the Collins, Feinstein, Rockefeller, Lieberman legislation, I say, come on and work with us. We can and must resolve our differences. In fact, around some of the major areas of discussion, controversy, the section of our bill that has performance requirements for private sector entities that own the most critical infrastructure, which, if attacked, could cause mass deaths, casualties, catastrophic economic loss, and a denigration of our national security. Those are, and then the other section being the information sharing section, where some people have civil liberties or privacy concerns. There's really a good faith effort going on to resolve those differences, because I think increasingly members of the Senate on both sides, just reacting to the facts, are worried that this is a real and present danger to our security. Perhaps the most real and present immediate danger of a massive attack on our homeland that exists today is by cyber attack. And I don't think any of us want to look back and say, well, why didn't we act before we were attacked? And therefore, I'm encouraged by these deliberations. What I say to anybody else who has concerns about our bill, members of the Senate, please be in touch with Senators Collins, Feinstein, Rockefeller, or myself. If we can't resolve our differences, then draft amendments and let's debate them on the floor and have up or down votes and let the Senate work its will. As Senator Reid said in his remarks yesterday, and I quote again, everybody knows this Congress can't pass laws that don't have broad bipartisan support. So we're going to need to work together on a bill that addresses the concerns of lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. And that time is coming soon, I'm confident to say, based on my conversations with the majority leader. That time is coming soon on the floor of the Senate. But we've got to start now to make sure that we're ready when the bill comes to the Senate floor. I guarantee you that one day in the near future, if we don't pass comprehensive cyber security legislation, and there is a serious and significant attack on us over cyberspace, we will rush to pass it, and that will be too late, and we will not do it in a thoughtful way. Time grows short while the threat keeps swelling. What if the next 22-year-old who decides to take over a water plant or an oil or gas pipeline or an electric power plant decides to make a more convincing demonstration than just posting screen pictures online? If a 22-year-old can do this, think what an enemy nation with a significant amount of money and personnel and training behind it could do to us if we're not adequately defended. So I say to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, because this is not a partisan issue at all, this is a national security, homeland security issue, let's get to work. Let's get ready for the floor debate on cybersecurity that I'm confident is coming soon, and then let's pass this urgently needed legislation for the sake of both our national and economic security. I thank the chair, and I yield the floor. And I would suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
In the only real legislative work today, the Senate tabled a couple of amendments relating to the Farm Bill, the $969 billion Farm Bill. CQ reported on those two, saying that the vote was 50 to 46 to table a proposal that would repeal the federal price support system for sugar producers. They also voted down by 65 to 33 an amendment that would eliminate the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, commonly known as SNAP or food stamps, and replace that with a program to provide block grants to states to operate their own programs. Off the floor, meanwhile, senators working on agreeing on amendments. Senator Coburn, according to CQ, suggesting a package of roughly 40 amendments to the legislation to be considered over several days rather than moving on a few amendments at a time. But so far today, really only work on those two amendments we mentioned, several speeches on the Farm Bill and other issues, including national flood insurance.
Madam President.
The senator from Oregon is recognized.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent to vacate the quorum call and to speak as if in morning business for up to 20 minutes.
Without objection, so ordered.
Madam President, I'm going to take just a few minutes to outline the amendments that I plan to offer on the Farm Bill. And in beginning, I particularly want to commend the chair of the committee, Senator Stabenow, and Senator Roberts. I think we all understand that if you want to tackle a big issue, an important issue, you've got to find a way to come to something resembling common ground. And this bill is especially important. This is a jobs bill at a time our country needs good-paying jobs. It is an extraordinarily important health bill, particularly one with great implications for how America tackles the issue of obesity. It is an environmental bill because it has great implications for conservation. And, of course, it has extraordinary impact on rural communities that are hurting right now. And so the amendments that I'm going to be offering on the Farm Bill address those major concerns, and those concerns are particularly important to my state. My home state does a lot of things well, Madam President, but what we do best is we grow things. We grow things and we want to add value to them, and then we want to ship them somewhere. And we grow lots and lots of things, hundreds of crops, wonderful fruits, wonderful vegetables, and we want to have a chance to grow this part of our economy. It is a $5 billion economy for the state of Oregon, and one that we want to strengthen in the days ahead. The first amendment that I will be offering on the Farm Bill, Madam President, addresses the farm-to-school program. Schools all across the country purchase the produce, pears and cherries, tomatoes and lettuce they serve to school kids from Department of Agriculture warehouses. In some cases, these warehouses may be hundreds and hundreds of miles away. There are schools, however, who wish to source their fruits and vegetables locally, and there are producers who wish to sell their goods to local schools. Now, you don't have to be a fancy economic thinker, but that really sounds like a market to me. And the Congress ought to enable this market, not make it more difficult for this market to function. Now, I've just spent a lot of time in rural Oregon over the last few months, and as I've indicated, Harry and David, a producer in my home state, and a lot of senators have gotten their wonderful products over the years for holiday gifts. They would like to sell their wonderful pears to the school down the street. In attempting to do so, Harry and David have been met with a real maze, a welter of really odd federal rules that has prevented them from doing so. It should not be, Madam President, bureaucratic water torture for a local producer to sell to a nearby school. And it's getting at that kind of bureaucracy and red tape that my amendment on farm to school seeks to address. As of now, federal agriculture policy seems to be dishing out a diet of paperwork, process, and limited options when we ought to be promoting, innovation and getting away from this sort of one-size-fits-all approach. So my farm-to-school amendment would allow for at least 5 farm-to-school projects across the country, representing regions from all over the country, where states like mine that were innovative, with proven, established farm-to-school programs in place, would actually be able to tap, Madam President, their full potential to source healthy, quality produce to nearby schools that prefer to buy their food locally rather than from one of these faraway federal warehouses. Now, under this kind of approach, with this crucial program, the schools are going to win, our farmers are going to win, and our kids are going to be able to enjoy delicious local produce every day under this particular amendment. The second amendment that I plan to offer, Madam President, also encourages healthier eating. And this one deals with the SNAP program, the program that was formerly known as food stamps. And as the President of the Senate knows, this program represents a substantial amount of the funding for the Farm Bill. It's an over $70 billion federal program. There are 700,000 SNAP recipients in my home state of Oregon. For too many Oregonians, this program is the only thing that stands between them and hunger. And I have said it on this floor before. I want to say it again. I am not in favor of cutting these benefits. Quite the contrary. And I think Senator Gillibrand has an excellent amendment to ensure that that doesn't take place. I hope that she will win support here in the Senate for it. We shouldn't have, in a country as rich and strong as ours, as many Americans going to bed at night hungry and trying to dig themselves out of the Great Recession at the same time. So I am not in favor of cutting SNAP benefits, but I am, Madam President, in favor of incentivizing this program to make it possible for those of modest incomes to get healthier, more nutritious foods, especially in light of the growing obesity epidemic that our country faces. And, Madam President, what troubles me is that in one sense, the food stamp program, the SNAP program, is something of a conveyor belt for calories. It essentially says all of the various food products are equal. And at a time when we see such extraordinary rates of obesity, particularly for low-income children and low-income women, I would only hope that we could look at ways to create incentives for healthier eating. I am not in favor of setting up some kind of federal policy that starts dictating from Washington, D.C. what folks who are using the SNAP program can eat. I'm not interested in some kind of national nanny program or something that says you can't eat this or you can't eat that. What I am proposing is that here in the Senate we look at ways, particularly when you're talking about $70 billion of federal nutrition spending, to look at ways to at least promote healthier eating wherever possible and the increased consumption of healthy fruits and vegetables. Studies by the Centers for Disease Control show that low-income women and children, those who are most likely to receive SNAP benefits, are more likely to be obese than higher-income women and children. So what I am proposing with this amendment, Madam President, is giving the states some flexibility to try out ways to make SNAP benefits a launch pad for better nutrition rather than, as I've characterized it, a conveyor belt for calories. And what I'd like to see, Madam President, and I know the President of the Senate hails from a state with a substantial amount of agriculture, is to see, for example, farmers and retailers and health specialists and those who rely on the SNAP program get together and see if they can find a consensus, some common ground, on a way to wring more nutritional value out of those SNAP benefits. We've tried this idea out, Madam President, on those in our state, those in the retail community and farmers and anti-hunger groups and others, and they've said, we certainly think that we could work together to do more to improve nutritional outcomes under this very large program. So the amendment makes clear, Madam President, that you couldn't get a waiver to reduce eligibility or reduce the amount of benefits that someone on the SNAP program receives. But you could, for example, try various approaches to promote nutritional eating. A state could encourage SNAP recipients to purchase more fruits and vegetables by partnering with grocery stores or other food sellers to provide coupons enabling SNAP recipients to purchase extra or discounted fruits and vegetables. There are now programs that allow SNAP benefits to be exchanged at farmers markets for coupons to purchase $2 worth of produce for $1 of SNAP benefits. The cost of the extra produce is paid for using non-federal funds. A state waiver could enable this type of program, for example, to be expanded beyond farmers markets. So there are a host of innovative proposals, in my view, that could improve public health, increase the consumption of healthy food, and I just hope that as we go forward towards the conclusion of this legislation here in the Senate, Madam President, that we can look at ways to accept the proposition that not all of the wisdom resides in Washington, D.C., particularly when we are seeing these skyrocketing rates of obesity, tragically with special implications for low-income women and children. I think there are better ways to proceed. This amendment empowers the states to have that opportunity. The third amendment that I'm going to offer, Madam President, I have not spoken about on the floor to date, and I want to take just a minute to describe what this amendment deals with. It is an amendment that I plan to offer that addresses the issue of industrial hemp farming. It is co-sponsored by Senator Rand Paul. It is identical to legislation in the other body with 33 bipartisan co-sponsors. This is, in my view, a textbook example of a regulation that flunks the common sense test. There is government regulation on the books today that prevents America's farmers from growing industrial hemp, and what's worse is this regulation is hurting job creation in rural America and increasing our trade deficit. When my colleagues get, I think, more information about this outlandish, outrageous restriction on free enterprise, I think most of my colleagues are going to say that the restriction on industrial hemp is really a poster child for dumb regulation. The only thing standing in the way of taking advantage of this very profitable crop is a lingering misunderstanding about its use. And the amendment that I have filed on this issue will end a ridiculous regulation once and for all. Right now, Madam President, the United States is importing millions of dollars of hemp products to use in paper products, construction materials, textiles, and a variety of other goods. We're importing a crop, Madam President, that the U.S. farmer could be profitably growing right here at home if not for government rules prohibiting it. Our neighbors to the north can see the potential for this product. In 2010, the Canadian government injected over $700,000 into their blossoming hemp industry to increase the size of their hemp crop and fortify the inroads, Madam President, fortify the inroads that the Canadians are making in U.S. markets at the expense of our farmers. It was a very good bet. U.S. imports have consistently grown over the past decade, increasing by 300% in 10 years, and from 2009 to 2010, they grew 35%. The number of acres in Canada devoted to growing industrial hemp nearly doubled from 2011 to 2012. Now, I know that there are going to be members of Congress and others who are listening to this, and they're going to say, all this talk about hemp is basically talk about marijuana. The fact of the matter is, while they come from the same species of plant, there are major differences between them. Major differences between them, and I want to just take a moment to recognize what those differences are and to focus on the benefits from producing domestically the hemp we already use. Under this amendment, the production of hemp would still be regulated, but it would be done by the states through permitting programs, not the federal government. 9 states have already put legislation in place to provide for a permitting system that enforces the prohibition on marijuana and ensures that industrial hemp maintains a very low THC level under 0.3%. The lowest grade marijuana typically has 5% THC content. The bottom line, Madam President, is no one is going to get high on industrial hemp. Now, hemp has been a profitable commodity in a number of countries. In addition to Canada, Australia also permits hemp production, and the growth in that sector helped their agricultural base survive when the tobacco industry dried up. Over 30 countries in Europe, Asia, and North and South America currently permit farmers to grow hemp, and China is the world's largest producer. In fact, our country is the only industrialized nation that prohibits farmers from growing hemp. Oregon is home to some of the major manufacturers of hemp products, including Living Harvest, one of the largest hemp food producers in our country. Business has been so brisk there that the Portland Business Journal recently rated them as one of the fastest-growing local companies. Now, there are similar success stories in other states with industrial hemp. One company in North Carolina has been incorporating hemp into building materials, reportedly making them both stronger and more environmentally friendly. Another company in California produces hemp-based fiberboard. No country is better than ours at developing, perfecting, and expanding markets for our products. As the market grows, it ought to be domestically produced hemp that supplies that growth. Madam President, I'd just like to close on this topic with a couple of the statements by one of the leading newspapers in my state, the Bend Bulletin. And Madam President, I think it'd be fair to say that the Bend Bulletin would not cite itself as one of the first places that you ought to look for left-wing thinking. And here's what they had to say with respect to this proposition when they encouraged support for my amendment. I quote here, "Producers of hemp products in the United States are forced to import it. That denies American farmers the opportunity to compete in the market. It's like surrendering the competitive edge to China and Canada, where it can be grown legally." The editorial then goes on to say, and I quote, "Legalizing industrial hemp does not have to be a slippery slope towards legalizing marijuana. It can be a step towards removing regulatory burdens that limit Oregon farmers from competing in the world market." Madam President, I would ask unanimous consent that a copy of the editorial from the Bend Bulletin on this issue be printed in the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
So, Madam President, for a farm bill that empowers farmers and increases rural jobs, let's give them the tools that they need to get the job done. Let's boost revenue for farmers and reduce the overhead costs for the business around the country that uses this product. And let's put more people to work growing and processing an environmental-friendly crop with a ready market in the United States. Madam President, for all the reasons I've described, I will be urging my colleagues to support this amendment so the law can be changed and farmers are not prevented from growing a profitable crop in the future. Even though my amendment is about growing a crop and should be clearly relevant to the Farm Bill, it may be blocked from getting a vote because of the Senate rules on what amendments are allowed to be offered once cloture is invoked on the bill. If I get the opportunity, I'm going to bring this amendment up through the regular order, but if cloture is invoked and my amendment is not allowed, I want colleagues to know that I will be back at this again until there are smarter regulations in place for industrial hemp. Madam President, in closing, let me say that I don't think you can overstate the importance of the best possible farm bill. Senator Stabenow and Senator Roberts have, in my view, done yeoman work in trying to build a bipartisan approach. And the question now is, can we use the amendment process to improve on the kind of bipartisan effort they brought to the floor? In each of the areas that I've described this afternoon, the question of improving the farm-to-school program, the question of how we can take steps to wring more value out of the SNAP program, better nutritional outcomes, and then help a promising industry, the industry of industrial hemp. Each of these areas, Madam President, gives us a chance to attain the objectives of what I've described as the best possible farm bill without spending one single dime of additional taxpayer money. Not a dime of additional taxpayer money. So it's my hope, Madam President, that we can take the good work that has already been done by Senator Stabenow and Senator Roberts and build on that. And I hope that the Senate will support the 3 amendments I've described this afternoon. And with that, Madam President, I would yield the floor, and I would also note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.